Welcome to this episode of the Ohio Lodge of Research podcast, OLR Connections. This week, we sit down with Brother Paul Saltz, a new member of the Ohio Lodge of Research, who at its annual meeting presented a paper to be elevated to that of active. In this conversation, we learn more about Brother Saltz, his vision for the future, what he hopes to research, and how he manages to grow his passion for Freemasonry in a very busy world. Let's start with a little bit of your background. I know you're fairly new to Masonry.
I have great grandparents on both sides of my family who were involved in masonry. I have a I had a great grandmother who was also ordered the Eastern Star. So that was always kind of part of how I felt where some of my heritage came from. Um, my dad's side, my paternal grandfather, temperament wise and everything, was the exact opposite of his dad, who was the Freemason. And so, as part of that, I think part of his rebellion, he opted not to go into Freemasonry. Um, Not that he still did not value learning and so forth. He was a music teacher his entire career, very much valued education. So there were still values there, but he did not join the fraternity. Um, my dad and I, at least since I became an adult, would talk off and on about Freemasonry. He currently is retired out in San Diego, California. Um, so would never join one of our Ohio lodges, but I've certainly planted some seeds where I think he's considering looking into what's available to him in the San Diego area. Um, and I've actually sent him a list of the lodges in San Diego, so that kind of cuts his research time down a little bit.
So he is not currently a Mason?
He is not currently a Mason,
Okay.
but he has done his own research into it off and on over the last few decades. Um, my maternal grandfather did not go into it, mainly due to time. Um, he was he is a retired firefighter from the city of Columbus, and he also owned his own house painting company and raised three kids. So, in addition to all that, he was also on civic association and other community organizing groups. So, very much just had no time to dedicate to it, unfortunately. Um, but when it comes down to me, I wanted to both reconnect with my family heritage as well as the fact that I thrive in environments of ritual and allegory and symbols and the philosophical concepts behind them. That's very much my sweet spot in terms of my own um, intellectual playground, if you will. So I have been looking into Freemasonry easily for the last 2 decades. Um, was never sure how I would make it work within what I was doing, other life, career, family, so forth. But last year, when the Grand Lodge of Ohio put out their open house information, and I was like, this just might kind of be the nudge that I personally needed to make that happen. And so I started looking at the lodges in my area, and I thought that Reynoldsburg would be the best fit. And so I went to the open house and I was fully embraced with open arms. I'll admit one of the biggest concerns that I had going into that open house is the fact that I am one of the rare breed openly gay married Freemasons that you don't hear about very often. And my husband and I had genuine concern about that. But when I brought that up at the open house, nobody batted an eye. Everyone was happy to learn about my family, and I was embraced with open arms. And that's
That's excellent.
how I knew that, this is a good fit and this is going to work well. Um, so it's been very positive ever since. Um, Kurt Armstrong was my master craftsman going through my 3 degrees. Um, right Worshipful Ken Cohen has been a fantastic mentor in addition to that, and has actually volunteered to be my mentor for my RSS masterpiece as I'm getting ready to get started on that. And so the connections and the relationships that have been built has been a fantastic experience and has just really energized my wanting to be involved as much as I can. Um, I do have a spouse who is disabled, and that does put some limitations on the length of my cable tow, but I certainly do what I can. And in terms of Ohio Lodge of Research specifically, having the opportunity to do my research in my own office, family close by, I can take care of what needs to be taken care of, but then also the opportunity to share the results of that research with a wider community is fantastic. And I was very honored to be able to present at the last annual meeting. And I look forward to presenting again in the future. So it's just, it feels very much that I'm at home in this environment, and I'm very happy for that. And it's a wonderful place to grow.
So you were exploring Freemasonry for 2 decades, you
Yes,
said.
yes.
Other than just the challenge of the time commitment and so forth, what was the final punch last year that said, I'm going to do it?
It was, I was at a point in my life where I needed to have the outlet of intellectual exploration, in personal growth, in just connecting with other men in a social environment of, for lack of better words, where we're putting ourselves at a higher expectation of civility, and to be able to interact in that environment, it was just, it was what I was needing in my life at that point. I have worked in the nonprofit and public sector pretty much my entire career. Um, so I'm very community public service oriented. My maternal grandfather was a huge inspiration on that. And it's something that, even though he never was able to become a Mason, he always spoke very, very highly of the fraternity and is very proud that I am one. I discovered where, between my professional life, my family life, even my spiritual life, because we do have a local church that I'm involved with as well, um, I still had that hole. And Freemasonry was just the perfect piece to fill that and complete that.
Nice. Let's put the whole puzzle together. I like it.
Very
Yeah.
much.
I remember when we met in Reynoldsburg that your background is in philosophy. Is that correct?
Philosophy and political science, yes.
Why does someone study philosophy? Let's start there. And that's
Sure.
not a judgment by any means.
Oh,
That's just
not at all.
why did you choose that?
I'm a proud geek, first and foremost. That is, I completely own that fact. Um, but besides, that the area of philosophy that interests me the most is applied ethics and how we live a good life and how we interact with others and why.
Mm-hmm.
And that has what has driven my interest in philosophy and in the many different aspects of Freemasonry is looking at specifically how we structure our own lives, why we structure it the way we do, and how does that ultimately affect every person around us. So, for instance, one of the things that I'm trying to do, and I guess is kind of an ongoing thing, is I'm looking at, for example, from a practical side of that, looking at how do I structure my day and why do I structure it accordingly? How does that affect my family, my coworkers, my lodge brothers, and everyone else in the community that I interact with? And even though there's a practical side to that, that's also a good philosophical question to really delve into. And so it's that kind of mental exploration that really just becomes a playground for me.
Well, it's interesting that you have been able to tie that passion into what you're doing with Freemasonry and with the Royal Schofield Society and so forth. So you've been a Mason for about a year now, and as you mentioned, you're already involved in the Ohio Lodge of Research, and you have already presented a paper and been elevated to an active there. And you are very active in the Royal Schofield Society. I'm assuming a few other things as well. But kind of what was the order of those things? What did you get involved in first? And
The first thing I started getting involved with was actually doing our lodge's monthly breakfasts, which Reynoldsburg Lodge, our breakfast is the last Saturday of every month, and the proceeds support Special Olympics, the Reynoldsburg Special Olympics specifically. So there was a call out at a meeting that they were needing help. And so I showed up to my first breakfast and I've been doing it every month ever since. It's wonderful to see the community gather. The brethren who help are just fantastic to talk to, and it's just a fun time. So I'm an early riser anyway, so it works for me. And so that really was kind of the first thing that I got involved with. Um, the next thing I was ended up doing really was, well, Ohio Lodge of Research and Royal Schofield kind of started in tandem. Um, what ended up happening was the first paper that I ultimately presented. It was just something I wrote for fun initially. Um, I was just brainstorming ideas and I created a short list of topics that I wanted to delve further into just for my own enjoyment. And so the paper that I presented on the Cardinal Virtues was just really the first one on the list. And so that happened. And then as I was preparing for my master's degree proficiency, my master craftsman, as a gift, decided to make the initial payment for my Royal Schofield because we had been talking about it, and he is 32-degree Scottish Rite, and we were talking about how my journey was going to go, and I told him eventually I would like to go Scottish Rite, but I want to do Royal Schofield first. I want to start it, and I want to see it all the way through. And so he, as a gift, decided to make that first initial payment. I got in and I've been chipping away at it ever since. Um, and so, really, Ohio Lodge of Research and Royal Schofield really has been kind of a tandem thing for me. So, I've got, especially after speaking with Mike Miller at the annual meeting, I've been able to kind of delineate a stricter line between what's Royal Schofield appropriate versus what's more open for Lodge of Research. And that really kind of helped me rethink what my masterpiece would look like, um, and really meet the metrics that is needed over there. Whereas I can be a lot more free to go into the topics that I want to go to over in for Lodge of Research. And so I'm just kind of flowing back and forth. And it's a for me, it's a fantastic um it's an intellectual freedom that I've not enjoyed for a very long time. And to me, it's very invigorating. And it's fun. It is just fantastic in terms of my own experience and how it has elevated my own thought process and how I want to. Now I'm also serving as a master craftsman at Reynoldsburg, how I even handle my mentoring sessions with candidates and what kind of conversations we can have there. So I would encourage as any master mason who has any inclination to delve more into what can be an awesome intellectual playground to definitely get involved in both Royal Schofield and Ohio Lodge of Research. I would highly, highly recommend it to anyone.
So, and you kind of mentioned that the conversation with Mike allowed you to separate the two. How would you describe the difference of the two? You know, what are the assets of the Lodge of Research? What are the assets of the Royal Schofield Society?
Sure. Um, what really helped me frame it in my own mind was when Mike provided me a copy of the full metrics, and it mentions that the masterpiece really is meant to be a gift to either your lodge or the fraternity as a whole. And to me, that looks more at the practical aspects of the lodge, um, in terms of its operations, in terms of its regular practice in doing the degree work, and so forth. Um, I know I've seen other brothers advertise on Facebook their masterpieces, and they go into how do we communicate better? How do we do? And it's very much a practical kind of a thing. And so I completely rethought my original idea and I put it in far more practical terms. Whereas with Royal Schofield Society, you can delve into the theoretical, you can delve into the different lines of historical arguments in terms of what different lines of philosophical thought approach different degrees and so forth. There's a The sky is the limit, I think, in terms of the different directions of intellectual inquiry that you can have there. So I would say, at least from my own personal experience, being able to do the two in tandem has worked very well because it allows me to think on both sides. I'm able to look at the practical aspects of running the lodge while at the same time I have this freedom over here that I can just explore pretty much whatever I want.
So the Royal Schofield Society is more the practical side. The Lodge of Research is more the theoretical side. I
Mm-hmm.
like that description of it. That's very nice.
Thank you.
Um, so you mentioned that you sat down and made a list of topics, and the Cardinal Virtues were just the first one on the list. So
Yes,
do we have many more papers to look forward to from Paul
that
Saltz?
I'd say yes. I can't say how fast they'll be cranked out, but I would say most definitely. there's going to be plenty more papers that'll be coming, and I look forward to the opportunity to sharing all of them.
You want to sneak peek any of the topics, or what? I'm curious what's on your mind.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. One is I want to look at the aspect of the circumambulation going around the lodge room during ritual, and also looking at other versions of connecting with the divine through movement in sacred space. Specifically comparing it to the labyrinth, which is a spiritual practice that I use in my own life, and comes to us all the way. We have the Chartres labyrinth from the 12th century, and then going, I believe there's labyrinths that have been much, much older in the British Isles, in around Crete and elsewhere. And so that is one that I want to look at. I want to look at the tradition of wearing gloves in lodge, why some do, why some don't, what are even some of the potential ethical implications one way or another. So that's one I want to look at. And those are just two examples that I can come up with off the top of my head without pulling the binder off the shelf. So
No, I got you. Yeah. And I see a labyrinth on the wall behind you.
yes, this is a fingerboard representation of the Chartres labyrinth design specifically. I have this at home. I've got a spherical labyrinth that actually sits on my desk in my work office. And then our church has an outdoor and an indoor labyrinth that is walkable there as well. So it's something that I have, it's been probably what? I'd say since 2005, 2006. I've been utilizing the labyrinth in my own spiritual practice.
Personally, I'd be curious to learn more about that. That's not something I'm not familiar with.
Okay.
So very interesting, because as I think you mentioned earlier, there really is no limit, right? The sky's the limit. Anything we can think of, we can try.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
we have, depending on how you look at it, 300 plus years of history that you can delve into from that aspect. And then you have the web ritual, which you can loads and loads of options there in terms of paper topics. You have other jurisdictions that use completely different kinds of ritual than what we do here in Ohio. So you can do compare and contrast with all of those. Then, if you really want to delve into it, you can bring in York Rite, Scottish Rite, and start examining all of that too. So, and of course, they all have their own study groups and so forth that we don't want to necessarily impinge upon. But in terms of the umbrella of potential topics to explore, there really is no limit on it, just our own imaginations.
One of the challenges, I think, for a lot of new Masons is to find a home, find a place that fits their needs. And
Yes.
it sounds like you've either been very well organized or very lucky. I'm not sure which in finding that home for yourself.
Well, I certainly find myself very fortunate
There you go.
that
Yeah.
I have a fantastic home lodge with some great brethren who have been amazing as I've started my Masonic journey, and I can't thank them enough. Um, and then, of course, with both Royal Schofield and Ohio Lodge of Research, it has been a fantastic expansion of my Masonic experience that has allowed me the intellectual freedom to really go into the headspace, if you will. Um, there's absolutely nothing wrong with not being an intellectual Mason or even an intellectual lodge. Every lodge has its purpose within the greater body, and we all are doing our best to become better men one way or another. But like you said, for those of us who do have that inclination to want to explore more, this is a fantastic opportunity. And I think that it's important for Masons to know that Ohio Lodge of Research is here and the opportunity that it can afford.
Excellent. Very well said. I think it's important. I think you're illustrating it. It's very important to recognize that there is a place for an active member of the fraternity.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Um, Actually, we just had our stated meeting, and the topic for the educational piece was just having a conversation about leadership and what that looks like and how leadership in Lodge can look like, even if you're not an officer. Um, you can take charge of an event, you can lead a discussion, you can help with breakfast, you can run a fundraiser, you can do specific things that don't necessarily require sitting in a specific chair and all the any what the realm of everything that that particular chair means. So there's loads of options for activity. I think the fraternity as a whole needs to show a little bit of restraint in that for the brothers who are not capable of doing everything, they shouldn't be made to feel bad that they can't do everything. They simply need to know that what they can do is valued and appreciated. And
Agreed.
so I know we have, well, my own mentee that I'm currently working with right now, hoping to deliver his fellow craft proficiency in September. Crazy work schedule. Does medical transport. So, and has had to do a lot of coverage and overtime. So, time is limited there, but bakes a cake for every single meeting and breakfast. And it's awesome. And we absolutely love it and appreciate it. And so, he's found his niche and it has worked really, really well for him. And we have shown our appreciation to that fact. And I think we need more of that so that any candidate isn't scared that they're not going to be expected to basically have a different body to visit 6 nights a week. And I know there are brothers who do that. I have no idea how they manage to not sleep on the couch, but that's where I'm coming from on that. But for we just need to make sure that every brother knows that they are valued and appreciated for all the action that they can put in and commit to, no matter what size it may be.
Again, well said. Probably two of the most influential Masons in my life never held an office.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm on board with you. I completely agree with what you're saying there. What are your plans moving forward? How do you want to see your journey continue?
As far as supporting my mother lodge and the wonderful fun I'm having with Lodge of Research, I look forward to a wonderfully continued journey that I am excited about what the years will bring.
Well, good luck in everything else that you do, again, I look forward to the new things that you're going to share with us, and I have a feeling that you're going to be one of those guys that I learn a lot from. So I
Well,
appreciate it.
I thank you very much, David. I hope you have a wonderful rest of weekend.
You too. Enjoy, and we will talk to you later. Thanks a
Will
lot.
do. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye.